The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Wisconsin.
We all know the benefits of physical activity, but what about the effects of mental exercise? Practitioners of yoga and meditation feel the mind and body are connected. We can train our bodies to become physically stronger, but can we train ourselves to be happier? Is the key to health concealed within the mind? Find out next, during office hours. Hi, I'm Ken Goldstein, Professor of Political Science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Today we are talking about exciting new research on meditation and healthy minds. I am joined by Dr. Richard Davidson, Vilas Professor of Psychology and Psychiatry. He is also the director of the new Center for Investigating Healthy Minds. Richie is a recipient of the American Psychological Association's Distinguished Scientific Contribution Award and was named one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time magazine. Richie, welcome to Office Hours.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thanks for coming by. A lot of attention has been paid to your work recently and your relationship with the Dalai Lama, but your interest in Eastern meditation long predates that relationship with the Dalai Lama and your particular research program. Tell me about that.
Well, that's true. When I was a graduate student in the mid-1970s, I had the opportunity to spend time with people whose demeanor and whose presence was very inviting and very infectious in lots of ways. And these were people who I really felt very good about and wanted to be around them more. And one of the things I learned about them is that they had in common an interest in and practice of meditation. And after my second year of graduate school, I actually went off to India to the consternation of some of my professors at that time. And wanted to get a taste of what this was myself in a very direct way. And that was the time that I did my first intensive meditation retreat and had some inside familiarity with what these practices were like. And I came back with tremendous enthusiasm, convinced that this was really something that was important for Western science to know more about, and with the fervent desire to begin scientific research on the impact of these kinds of practices.
So I want to talk a little bit more about what this intensive meditation entails, but just maybe it's inside academic politics. So you come back to graduate school and your advisors who are not happy that you went to India, and then you come back and tell them that you now want to systematically study that. Encouraged, discouraged?
They said, Richie, this is not a good way to begin a successful scientific career. So that was the predominant response that I received.
So in some ways there's a lesson here. Do what you like, do what you love, and follow the path. So when you said you went out and you did an intensive meditation retreat because people you'd met, you liked their matter, you liked their infectiousness. What does that entail?
The intensive meditation retreat? Well, this was a retreat where I was silent for a period of 2 weeks, and I was practicing for somewhere around between 12 and 16 hours a day, and in complete silence with no eye contact. So it's a quite rigorous, intensive immersion. Meditation boot camp. Meditation
boot camp. It's a funny combination of words. So, and you initially, in your initial academic work, you start doing this, or you do other things and then come back to this at another time?
I actually dabbled in it at the very early stage in my scientific career and published a few articles in the late 1970s and early 1980s on this. But it was very clear that this was not the right time to be doing it for both kind of political and sociological reasons within the discipline itself, but even more importantly because the methods that were available to us at that time were fairly coarse and crude. And I was convinced that the most interesting components of these kinds of training methods were not being sufficiently well captured by the methods that we had available. And so I pursued a career on the brain and emotion, which I'm still very passionately committed to today, where we study both normal emotion regulation as well as what happens when there are problems with the capacity to regulate emotion and what disorders may result from that.
So the reason you didn't study it was not only that it was not a strategic reason not to study something in particular, but you needed the perfect storm, if you will, of the scientific tools and to be able to execute a research design that you would be convinced was valid. What were those scientific tools that became available?
Well, one of the major tools was brain imaging. So at the time that I began my scientific career, brain imaging didn't exist, and actually neuroscience in the way we now understand it did not exist. There were enormous developments in both the methodology and technology and also in the conceptual understanding of the brain that provided the foundation for what we're now doing.
Okay. When we come back, I want to hear a little bit more about exactly what you do when you do the brain imaging. Richard Davidson from the Department of Psychology and the Department of Psychiatry here at UW-Madison joining us in Office Hours. Please stay with us.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Where others saw lumber, we recognized a treasure. Where others saw the night, we chose the stars. Where others saw pieces, we unlocked the puzzle that could mean the end of paralysis and cancer. Since 1848, thinkers and achievers at Wisconsin have fearlessly sought ideas that transform the world. Keep on, Wisconsin. Keep on.
Welcome back to Office Hours. We're here with Richard Davidson from the Department of Psychology. So Richie, you were talking about brain imaging before, and that gave you the opportunity to study scientifically these things that have been of interest for quite some time in your life. So brain imaging, you get these images of people with electrodes or something connected to their head. Exactly what are you doing and what are you looking for when you're doing the brain imaging?
Well, there are different kinds of brain imaging. The major workhorse in our laboratory and most laboratories that are doing human brain imaging is the MRI scanner. MRI stands for magnetic resonance imaging, and this is a technology that does not involve ionizing radiation. So there's no exposure to X-rays, and it's very safe so that we can do it with kids, we can do it with adults, and we can do it repeatedly over time. And we're using the MRI in a very special way to look at brain function primarily rather than brain structure. So we're looking at the brain at work. And what we're measuring is a measure that is sensitive to the blood flow in the brain. When a particular area of the brain becomes more activated, there is more blood that actually flows to that area. And using MRI, we can actually detect these very local changes in blood flow that accompany mental activity. And it really is quite an astounding method. When I was a graduate student, I actually had dreams of a method like this. And we thought it was science fiction at the time. In about 1996 is when it became a reality. So way after I received my PhD, but this has really allowed us to peer into the black box.
So when you talk about an MRI, is it that MRI that they wheeled me into for my bum knee, that same sort of thing that many of our viewers also might have had MRIs for various things?
Yes, it's that MRI. We use a high field strength MRI, meaning that it has better resolution than the typical clinical MRI, but it looks very much like a standard clinical MRI.
So, I read one of the first studies. It was a Tibetan monk who I believe was French who came here, and you make the sound of, you threw him in the MRI, you stuck him in the MRI, and you went in the back room, and you were sort of amazed by what lit up. Tell me about that experience and why it was significant what you saw light up there.
Well, I'll be happy to, and then I can tell you about this particular French monk. The first study that we did with the long-term meditation practitioners was done with another brain imaging technique where we have electrodes that we place on the head using a cap or a net, and we put many electrodes on the head, 256. They measure the minute brain electrical signals that each of our brains generates all the time. And we observed when the meditators began to meditate and they were doing particular meditation to generate compassion, we observed a change in the brain that was visually detectable. Usually you have to use very sophisticated computer techniques to extract these signals, and we were sitting there and we actually saw the change with our naked eye. And this is something very, very unusual.
And where did you see that change in the naked eye? What exactly, I mean, if the term is light up, what lit up?
There were areas in the prefrontal cortex that lit up, and they lit up in a very particular way. There was the presence of gamma oscillations. These are oscillations that are very fast in frequency. They occur about 40 times a second, and they were very large amplitude, and they are associated with focused attention and with certain types of learning and memory. And in the normal brain, they are observed typically for periods on the order of 1 or 2 seconds. We observe them for minutes and even hours in these long-term practitioners, which is something that actually has never been reported before in the human brain. And we published this work in a journal called the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which is a very prestigious scientific journal. And it's the first time that a paper on meditation has ever been published in that journal. And that really helped to open up this whole field.
I want to continue more on that and hear the story of how this French monk ended up coming to Madison to do this very important study. So stay with us, you stay with us, please, on Office Hours.
Great People is our campaign for need-based scholarship aid. It's the key to the long-term well-being of the university as a whole.
In 1970, tuition cost about $500.
Today, it's about $9,000.
We don't want UW-Madison to be a university that is deemed to be out of reach.
The Great People Scholarship gives students a chance to succeed in life.
Support the Great People Scholarship. Visit uwgreatpeople.org.
Welcome back to Office Hours. I'm here with Dr. Richard Davidson from the Department of Psychology at UW-Madison, and we're talking about his path-breaking work on the effects of meditation. So, we talked about this French monk, Matthieu Ricard, how he ended up coming here and doing this, being someone who you could study. How did he end up coming here? And tell me about your meeting with the Dalai Lama.
Well, Matthieu is a very unusual monk. He's been a Tibetan Buddhist monk since 1967, obviously French by nationality. What makes him so unusual is he also holds a PhD in molecular biology from the Pasteur Institute, where he worked with François Jacob, the Nobel laureate. And so he comes with remarkable credentials, and someone who is able to bridge this kind of cultural divide in a way that is unlike any other person. Matthieu is deeply curious about science. He thought that when he became a Buddhist monk, he was leaving science behind completely, and his career has kind of come full circle. The Dalai Lama loves to refer to him as his best guinea pig. And so Matthieu has been very helpful in tweaking our paradigms and helping to design tasks that are appropriate to capture what's going on.
Tell me about your meeting with the Dalai Lama, because he also had an interest in science and proving some of this.
He did, and he invited me to meet with him initially in 1992. That was when I first met with him. He invited me to come to his house in India.
So wait, I got to excuse. So you're sitting at home in Madison, Wisconsin, and the phone rings, or you get a letter which says, "Come to India and meet the Dalai Lama."
I actually got a fax. You know, there was more faxes that were used in those days, and yes, and I first thought it was a joke, but when I confirmed it was real, off I went to India, and so I met with him for the first time then, and it was a very profound meeting that very significantly changed the course of my career and changed the course of my life. And he challenged me, and he said, look, you guys are using very sophisticated neuroscientific methods to study fear and anxiety and depression. Why can't you use those same methods to study kindness and compassion? And there was no good answer other than the fact that it was hard. but it was hard when we first began with emotions like fear and anxiety. And so I made a commitment to the Dalai Lama on that day in 1992 that I was going to do everything I could to put compassion on the scientific map. And if you look in textbooks of psychology in the 1990s, compassion was not in the index of any of them, and that is beginning to change.
And how do you show that? So you come back from India and you did this study with Mathieu Ricard, did I get it right?
Yes.
And then you embark on a series of other designs. What were these studies and what did they show?
Well, first of all, they showed that these long-term practitioners who spent tens of thousands of hours, the average number of hours among the practitioners we've tested, the long-term practitioners, is 34,000 lifetime hours. It's a big number, but and their brains are different. Their brains are different both at baseline, and their brains get even more different when they engage in meditation practices that are explicitly designed to cultivate compassion.
So let me interrupt you there, because that's a big deal. So people in psychology had said, or in medical science said, that the brain can change, but we mostly assume that's due to a physical trauma or you're in an emotionally bad household. But this is saying you can actually change your brain by meditation, not your environment or a bad physical environment.
Correct, just purely internally. So using your own mind, you can change your brain. And that is something that we feel is really important, because everyone who is living and breathing has a mind, and they can use it to change their brain in healthy.
So it really is that exercise analogy of a muscle.
Completely, and it's a very appropriate analogy, and it really is not fundamentally different. If we mentally exercise and rehearse certain kinds of qualities, we can enhance those qualities. We don't know what the limits of plasticity are, but there's certainly a change that is possible. And so the idea that characteristics like happiness and compassion can be extended and enhanced, I think, is something that our findings certainly support.
So let's take a break now, and when we come back, I want to talk about happiness. If happiness and compassion can be improved, like one's ability to run, do you have to spend 35,000 hours meditating to do it? So to find the answer to that question out, please stay with us on Office Hours.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Welcome back to Office Hours. We're here with Richard Davidson from the Department of Psychology, talking about the science of meditation and the science of compassion. So, 35,000 hours meditating. I'm sort of not even done the math of how many days and months and years is that can change someone's mind. Can we do a little bit less than that and get that as well?
This was a question that we were constantly being asked, and so we decided we needed to investigate it scientifically. And so we've recently completed a study where we took individuals who are interested in learning meditation but who have never meditated before, and they were actually randomly assigned to either a meditation group or a group that received training in cognitive reappraisal, which is derived from cognitive therapy, which is an empirically validated treatment to promote well-being and to relieve depression. And we looked at 2 weeks of training, 30 minutes a day. So these individuals were given training actually over the internet. They logged on whenever they could for a 30-minute period once a day for 14 consecutive days. And we did brain scans, neuroimaging, before and after the 2-week period. And we also had various kinds of behavioral measures to assess the impact of this kind of training on measures of altruism and compassion. And we found that just 2 weeks of training actually produces reliable differences in the brain that were clearly measurable using our MRI procedures. And we found that participants actually engaged in more altruistic and compassionate behavior as a consequence of the 2 weeks of training. So these findings clearly indicate that even short amounts of training can make a difference. Now, whether that lasts or not is something we don't know at this point in time. My own conjecture is that it's likely to last if these people continue to practice. But just as with physical exercise, no one would ever imagine that 2 weeks of physical exercise would enable a person to continue to enjoy those benefits if he or she did not continue to exercise.
So like any major academic work, there's people who try and replicate it, there's people who try and critique it. So what have been the major critiques of your work?
Well, one of the best critiques was when the Dalai Lama was invited to speak at the Society for Neuroscience in 2005. There was an article on the front page of the New York Times about it, and I was singled out in that article. And there was someone interviewed, and they were critical of my work because they said, Davidson can't possibly be objective about this since he's admitted in public that he himself meditates. And of course, I love that criticism because that would be like telling a cardiologist who studies the effects of physical exercise on cardiovascular function that he can't do any physical exercise for his entire professional career. Science is set up in ways that hopefully one has the appropriate checks and balances to enable these kinds of questions to be investigated objectively and honestly. This is something that we've obviously been trying to do. We've published findings that are non-findings, that is, failures to find differences between meditators and controls. So it's not a panacea. It's not good for everything. But I think that it is possible to do this work in a rigorous way.
So we have about a minute left. Follow up on that. Tell me what some of the applications for this are that you think that there may be and that you're testing now.
One of the most exciting is a project that we're doing now in the Madison public school system with 5th grade kids. And we think that some of these methods can be used with children to train them to better regulate their attention and better regulate their emotion in ways that will make a difference not just for their social and emotional behavior, but also for their academic performance.
Great. Richie, thanks so much for joining us today on Office Hours. Very much appreciate it. And I hope you'll come back and join us again sometime down the line.
Be my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks to all of you for joining us today. Don't forget, Office Hours is on the web via our university website, Facebook, and Twitter. Take a look and let us know your thoughts. From the University of Wisconsin-Madison, this has been Office Hours. Thanks for stopping by.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Wisconsin in association with the Big Ten Network.